we're going to just get started. And I'm Karen Rayforth. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Lafayette Cultural Arts Commission, the Arts and Cultural Resources Department in Lafayette, and the Community Foundation, Boulder County. I'm chair of the Lafayette Cultural Arts Commission, and behind the scenes we have Susan Booker, who's the Director of Arts and Cultural Resources Department. And soon, Bart will be speaking in front of us. So we invite you to continue to introduce yourself in the chat so we kind of know, we don't know who's out there, and so everybody else knows who's here. First, I want to acknowledge that we're privileged to be on the traditional lands of the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and the Ute peoples, and many other contemporary tribal nations that have ties to this land. Community Foundation Boulder County began the Trends Report in 1996, and this report contains over 150 indicators all about our social and economic health in this county, in all of our different communities. And directed by Bart, it comes out every other year to reflect who we are in the county. So unlike the census, which comes out every 10 years, this one comes out much more often, so it's more timely for all of us to be able to utilize. So it's important for us as residents and for those of us who serve or represent our residents to know about this information in a timely way. And certainly COVID has changed the information again, but we're doing the best we can to adapt that, and Chris will make some comments about that too today, I'm sure. We asked Chris to specifically tease out some of the information about Lafayette. So those of you who might have already known about this or seen some of the information, this is probably going to be partly new information. So we hope this data will help you make more informed decisions as a resident, and also what is needed for our town by learning about those we may not know or may not even know about. And that's why this is so important to the city, for staff, for commissioners, for all of us in nonprofits, as well as those of us who just want to be helpful residents in making Lafayette the best. And our presenter today is Bart, who runs the whole thing and has for many years. He's been at the Community Foundation for over 12 years, and he not only directs the Trends Report, but he's also Community Foundation's Vice President of Communications and Engagement. Chris has been known by many of you in the community as one of the co-founders of El Paso, and he's been a long time champion of early childhood education, trying to get ahead of all these problems. And El Paso particularly is dear to our hearts, since it's been here in town since for many years, but really located and headquartered here for the past couple of years. And they're an important resource to us that I think is not to be overlooked as a treasure for us. You may have seen Chris this week in print, reminding us about the desperate needs of so many nonprofits, and the foundation knows this very well, having given out well over $1 million for COVID relief themselves, as well as the fires in our community, as well as many other issues that they've always had our backs on. And he was reminding us that Tuesday is Colorado Gives Day. So if you have a chance to put a few dollars towards a nonprofit or the Community Foundation, it would be really great. And we'll put that in the chat if you want to access that sometime later. So take it away, Chris.
Well, thanks for that great introduction, Karen, and welcome everybody. I see we've got about 37 participants and climbing. I know registration was up around 60. So what a great privilege to talk with all of you, and nice to know of some familiar folks that are on this call, and also a pleasure to make your acquaintance if we've not had the privilege up to now. At the end of this, my email will go out, and I always welcome and am interested in feedback and questions, comments, concerns. The point of this Trends Report is really to serve the community, so it's only as good as it lands for you and answers the question, how can I make a deeper impact in my community? So thank you, Karen, and the Arts and Cultural Commission, and Susan Booker for doing all this behind the scenes. What a great event. I'm going to get right to it. We're going to do about a 35-minute presentation and leave some time for your questions. This is a real civic engaged crowd here, so I'll make sure we leave time for your questions, which you can plug into the chat. If we were in person, we would do this more organically, and I could read your body language and tell if you had a question. Instead, just put them in the chat as they occur to you, and Karen will be our MC and facilitate a Q&A at the end. So let's see. I would like to, Susan, could you stop sharing your screen and I will share mine?
There you go.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Susan, can you see the Community Foundation logo there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, let's kick this off. You know, Karen said that she wanted this to be a presentation focused on Lafayette. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. Looks like it's taking a moment to freeze up and think, just in time to start the presentation. Okay. Well, while the computer's catching up, let me just say Karen introduced well what the concept is of the Trends Report. It is a community indicators report. And here we go. I promised I would focus on Lafayette, of course, the Marquis de Lafayette. This is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I'm not an expert on the Hamilton musical, but you know, I like to be flexible and try to meet requests. So let's get right into this. Of course, I'm just kidding. This is actually going to be about the trends in our community of Lafayette, a town of about 26,000 people and growing. A little bit about the Trends Report. It is a community indicators report. We look at the social, economic, and environmental health of Boulder County. I see we've got Carmen Fawcett. Good to see you on the call, Carmen. She was instrumental in the latest census as a key to the outreach team. And I'll get into that here, but you know, about 2/3 of this data comes from the census and the American Community Survey. It is a biennial magazine. What you'll see is that this is really a franchise for us at the Community Foundation, a resource for civic leaders in the nonprofit, government, business sectors, people of faith. Anyone who's truly complemented this report with a podcast that you can hear monthly on KGNU with counties Boulder, Rosanna, Longo. Launched some community diaries that are also every Friday at 8:30 on KGNU. These are 3-minute first-person stories of connecting during this time of isolation. And we've just launched a 12-person cohort of storytellers called a Trends Reporting Fellowship, with the idea being that if we can help support the local news and information landscape through journalists and storytellers, through an equity lens, sharpening their reporting and deepening our focus on local issues, then we'll all be better informed and we'll make better decisions at a policy level. We couldn't do this without the sponsors. We are a nonprofit, and the Knight Foundation, Boulder County Government, Boulder Community Health, Boulder Chamber, Google, and Plant Moran, and the generosity of individual donors like you is what makes this possible. So the Trends Report is focused on 7 different chapters, and what we've started out first with is demographics. This is a picture of Nikki and Noah Larson. They lived in Boulder for 10 years, were incredibly civically engaged, ran campaigns for issues and candidates, volunteered, restored open space. But when it came time for them to purchase a home, they found that their budget brought them to Wheat Ridge, and this is them playing with their dog in the backyard. This has been a common issue, the lack of affordable housing, and it's not new to Lafayette either. When we talk about who are we, it's important that we recognize that more than half of us are here from another state. Full 55% of us came from elsewhere. People like Malik Salisbury, pictured here, who moved here a couple years ago from Iowa, works for Boulder Food Rescue, lives at Co-op in Boulder, and he says this is what makes it possible for him to live here. He's not sure how long he'll do it. As he says, it's hard to do good and do well when housing prices are this expensive across the county. This is Ray Myers. He's one of 14,000 Boulder County residents who are veterans, and he is among the fastest growing age band in our county and across the first world. I like to say we're participating in this trend. We're not alone in it. You can see this yellow line is our 65 and older population. I think it's actually time for a reboot. We've been talking about seniors defined as 65 and up. I think anymore it's somewhere in the 70s before you should be called a senior. I mean, the average life expectancy for humans in the first world has increased by 65% in 100 years. And so at any rate, we are going to go from about 50,000 of us in Boulder County being in this age bracket to about 100,000 of us in just 30 short years. So what does that mean for our social infrastructure? What does this mean for our attitudes and for how inclusive we are? We'll get into that in a minute. We're also becoming more diverse. This picture here is J.L. Mayers. He told our photographer to meet him on the tracks that separate East from West Longmont. This is Longmont's been the city that he's called home, just up the street from Lafayette for 5 generations. And his grandmother talks about why they always lived in East Longmont. It was because that was where Latinos were welcome. They weren't welcome on the west side of the tracks. And yet we need to change our attitudes, if only to welcome what's going to eventually become the majority demographic in our county. When we look specifically at the age distribution, for example, here between Latinos and Anglos, that's non-Hispanic whites, you can see that we've got our next generation coming up is much more Latino. Over 50% of Latinos, in fact, are under the age of 24, compared to about a third of whites. Our population is booming, particularly in Lafayette. Over the last 5-7 years, we've seen double-digit growth in Lafayette, as well as lots of towns in Boulder County. The pattern is that it's East County that's booming, whereas Boulder's pretty well built out, and the mountain towns aren't growing as quickly. Some of you may have met Kate Fisher in the past, and she has been doing a really incredible civic project called Front Portraits in Lafayette. She lives in Lafayette. That's her with her then 10-month-old pictured here, her son Knox. You know, an example of families that keep moving to Lafayette. You can see on this slide, when you look at Lafayette, that there's, you know, slightly more than average family households in Lafayette compared to the Boulder County average of 59%. That Boulder County average gets dragged down by the relatively few families who live in the city of Boulder. Again, housing prices are the main driver there. This is just a big fat slide on demographics. You can look more into this online if you Google Boulder County trends. I'm just focusing here on this column that says Lafayette, and I want to point out 2 of the stats that you see there. About, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rungs down, it talks about if you lived in the same house 1 year ago. Look how stable the population is in Lafayette. 85% of residents say that they lived in the same place a year ago. That may just seem normal because you live in Lafayette and that's what people do, but look at the national average. Only 8% nationally say that. Now across Boulder County, it's pretty typical to say that, less so in Boulder, more so in East County, where people are really making a home for themselves and their families. The other thing I'd point out on this slide in particular is just look how educated we are. Down there on bachelor's degree or higher, about 2/3 down the slide. National average is that about 1 in 3 of us have a bachelor's degree, us adults, and it's 56% in Lafayette, which is darn near close to the county average of about 64%. Of course, it's higher in the university town of Boulder. We're now moving to talk about trends we see in education, and overall student outcomes are improving amidst equity efforts. But boy, if this pandemic has laid anything bare, particularly for the younger students, trying to figure out how to approximate an education from home. This is where some disparities are really showing up that we won't see for a while. These are lagging indicators, not yet incorporating what the impact has been of the pandemic. But I think also, lest we say, well, how's this relevant? Because, we're in a pandemic and everything's on its ear. What I like to, the way I frame it is what this has done, this pandemic has laid bare the things that we've been tracking. This will end. The first vaccines are going to land in Boulder County in 9 days. And hopefully by this summer, everyone will have access to a vaccine. But this moment, this year, what it's shown us in stark relief is what we've been tracking in trends all along. So learning about these trends is not to say, well, it used to be relevant. It's to say the pandemic has made these even more relevant. We know, I mentioned in Lafayette and across the county, we're highly educated. This here is our cover story. Emily Sanchez, who is a Longmont High School product. Her mother immigrated here from Mexico. Her dad is descended from the Navajo tribe, and she's at Harvard as an undergrad right now, an incredible student who makes a real strong pitch in this trends report about the importance of representation and access for people of color to thrive in our education system. Until we can balance out and have teachers and mentors all along the way in our public system of education that look like, talk like, and share backgrounds, similar backgrounds with the students that are coming up through our system, we can continue to expect to have a hard road ahead as far as making sure that regardless of your race or ethnicity or your parents' education or income level, you're going to do well. It's just not the case yet. The big news when this trends report came out was that we'd found a way in Colorado to fund full day kindergarten. That was a big deal here in the Boulder Valley School District where Lafayette sits, because we at the time only had about a third of our kindergartners in full day programs. That went up to 100%. Of course, the pandemic has reversed all that as we've had to figure out how to get 5-year-olds educated on Zoom. Kind of a joke for that until your kid is, well along elementary school, as those of you with young kids know. But hopefully this will be repaired by next school year. And as a husband of a teacher who teaches elementary school here in the district, I can tell you there's just been no good options, and everybody's making do best they can. We know we've got a wide achievement gap, one of the widest in the states. You can cut this measure at lots of ways between minority students and their peers. You can measure kids that are growing up in low-income families compared to their peers. The bottom line is that whether you're growing up in Boulder Valley, St. Vrain, or anywhere across Colorado, this is showing the difference between kids coming from low-income background and their peers. There's just no difference. And so the question becomes, if we're so educated and we're so wealthy relative to the rest of the state here in Boulder County, why can't we do any better by our kids who are more dependent on school here than across the state? This is a really inspiring story. If anybody wants to be inspired, I encourage you to look up Anise Madrano. This is her picture. She's got a TED Talk that you can Google. Incredible story. She's a Centaurus High School product at CU Boulder now, and had been a real good student up until about middle school, when she kind of caved to the peer pressure around her, kind of feeling like, well, if you're from a Spanish-speaking background and Latina, maybe school's not your top priority. It took mentors outside the system and also a key trip in middle school down to the town in Mexico where her parents had grown up. And she met lawyers and doctors that were her cousins for the first time. And she really said, oh man, I better get my act together. And so she came back, and at Centaurus High School, against her advisor's recommendation, she signed up for harder classes, got herself in the IB track, and also pulled along, 6 or 8 of her friends that had grown up with her, Spanish speakers at home, and all of them thrived. It was a big challenge and struggle, but you should Google her and watch her speak about this herself. It's a very inspiring story. But the point is, our systems need to not rely on the superstars that rise above the system. The system needs to support students and connect with students of all backgrounds. So who knew that healthcare and vaccinations would be such a hot topic after this trends report came out back in fall 2019. But my goodness, it's all that we can talk about on the nightly news and in our communities. And, I would say there's some headlines here heading into the pandemic about insurance coverage, mental health, and vaping and vaccinations. So, the story is that this is probably the most volatile chart we run in the magazine, has been since the passage of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. What you see with the 2 arrows on this chart is about Medicaid and CHIP Plus, which is the publicly provided health insurance for low-income families and expectant moms and kids. And you can see in that first arrow back in the middle of 2014, when Colorado agreed to expand Medicaid under the ACA, Boulder County's public health soldiers went out there and did yeoman's work to enroll so that we had twice the number of families in a short span of 3 years able to have some support from this safety net. Then the Supreme Court allowed the individual mandate which is a cornerstone reason why the plan works. And so you've seen enrollment taper off a bit. I'll be interested now with the Supreme Court stacked more conservatively as to whether the ACA continues to endure. But this is a local example of how federal policy hits home. Are we going to still have somewhere between 50, 60,000 families that are economically vulnerable, insured and protected by this federal benefit, or are we going to slip back down to where it was before the ACA, which is about half coverage? Teen vaping had been a headline. This is a good news, bad news thing. The bad news was that, across the nation and especially in Boulder Valley had the highest spike in vaping use among teens as anywhere in Colorado, just off the charts. And but the good news is that we were able to get our public messaging straight, pass some laws at city council levels, and actually start to see this level off. I'll be very curious to see in the next report where we're at with this. But vaping was something that teens thought was okay. And even though 80% knew that smoking cigarettes could cause lung cancer, it just didn't compute when it came to vaping. But of course, it can cause even worse lung damage and cancer. So we'll see where this winds up next time we check in. We've had low vaccination rates in Boulder Valley in particular. And one thing that this pandemic has taught us is to repeat a mantra of, when's this vaccine coming out? I'm real curious to see what the uptake is in Boulder County, well, across the country and the world, really. We've never had a moment, well, we have, it was 100 years ago with the last time we experienced a global pandemic with the influenza. But in our lifetimes and in our friends and families' memory, we've never experienced a pandemic. And so when this vaccine comes out, we know there's a divide ideologically already in our country between those who are very eager to take it and those who don't even believe that the pandemic is a thing. But here locally, where I think the debate is going to boil down to whether you have a personal value about raising free-range organic children free of vaccines. I say that almost tongue-in-cheek, but it's consistent enough as a pattern to where You just have to name it. I do worry about whether we will have as high an uptake on our vaccinations. I hope that this is a game-changing moment for our awareness generally, not just for the vaccine against the coronavirus, but also for our rates to increase on all the other normal measles, mumps, rubella type vaccines kids are supposed to take. It's a public health threat when we don't have herd immunity up in the high 90s. And we've not had that, particularly at some schools. You know, our focus around the community has sharpened around mental health. That's been a good thing. We've had a good progression, I think, in knocking down the stigma that healthcare is something that's legit if it's physical, but not so much if it's mental. We've seen evidence of public support for this with new facilities opening at the jail and the hospital focused on mental health, also on tackling opioids and suicide prevention, and also paying attention to teen mental health issues, particularly with the LGBTQ parts of our population. This is what I call the most consequential chart in trends. You can look at Lafayette with the light blue and just see the hockey stick rise in home prices, valuations. In Lafayette, for a long time, we were cruising around the medium house purchasable at around $300,000. So you're needing to scrape together about $60,000, 20% down payment in order to get your toehold in that American dream of wealth building by owning. And we bumped along there from 2005 all the way up to about 2011. And then we took this rocket curve up, and at last count 2 years ago, the median home value in Lafayette was $600,000. I wouldn't be surprised if it's well past $650 at this point. If you figure on strong years can bring 7% increases, 14% on 600. That's in the high 600s now, I would guess. One of the things that stuck out to me when we were looking at all these stats was how job growth has so outpaced housing unit growth. There have been 3.5 jobs created over the previous decade for every housing unit that has been built. And so when you just look at the supply demand economics of that, it's no wonder that Lafayette has gone from being a place that feels affordable to those who might prefer to live closer into their job that may be in Boulder, to a place that even now doesn't feel affordable anymore. People are, driving east till they qualify. And longer and longer commutes also has other consequences, not just on the individual quality of life, but also on our environment. And cities are struggling to keep up with a generally accepted mandate that we need to collectively get to 15% affordable housing. This is true in Lafayette as well. I mean, here's a photo of a condo in the Aspenwall development, one of the recent affordable housing developments in Lafayette. You can see that we had to redefine for this trends report what affordable is. For a long time, we were saying affordable is 150 or lower for a condo. This time, all the experts were saying, no, you got to go to 275 to even start finding housing. So in Lafayette, under the new definition of sub 275, you've had 24 units that have qualified as affordable out of 135 in the year 2018, which is, still ahead of the game compared to others across the county. But if we're going to reach that countywide goal of 15%, we're going to need to up the pace on this. Childcare costs. Anybody on this call with kids knows that first thing you do is have babies and start thinking about planning for their college education. And then the next thing is you get slapped with the realization that if the parents in the house are working, it's like a college tuition drill until they get into kindergarten. Here in Boulder County, $27,000 will get you a year of childcare for one kid under the age of 5. If you were to drive down to Pueblo, you could cut that bill in half. So the cost of living is driven up here mainly by housing and also by childcare costs. We also know there's a great disparity across the country and here in Boulder County between Anglo and Latino households as far as how well they're getting by financially. The study by the Center on Law and Policy showed that while the poverty level for a family of four is around $27,000, you actually need about $86,000 to get by without any kind of public assistance here in Boulder County. They also, by comparison, were able to show that if you lived in Pueblo, the total family would need to bring in for a family of four would be significantly less, $53,000. And then the chart on the bottom shows that while the Anglo households in Boulder County are keeping pace with that self-sufficiency standard, you can see how that number for Anglos in Boulder County, 85,000 matches the 85,000 needed for self-sufficiency. The Latino population is making about half that per household, which is lower than the national average compared to the Anglo households that are making enough above Anglo households nationally to keep pace with our cost of living. So huge disparity right there. We also see a big disparity in the gender pay gap in Boulder County. And you can see here on the left, women's earnings, and on the right, men's earnings. In Boulder County, we've got women earning less than the national average, 55 compared to 61,000. And we've got men earning more than the national average significantly, 96,000 compared to 86,000 nationally. So we're working with the YWCA this year to try to better understand this trend. There's a lot to it. Part of it is that we're a little bit more Brady Bunch 1950s family structure here in Boulder County than our progressive politics would let on. And part of it is a lot of the glass ceiling factors that have kept women down in the workforce now for centuries. So I think we may, I saw Julie Pillar from Sister Carmen is on with us, and Suzanne Crawford may be as well. I'll let them speak to this maybe in the Q&A, but when you talk about family poverty in Lafayette, we're talking about, about 9% of the households or of the families are living under the poverty level. That's about 27,000 for a family of four with two parents and two kids under the same roof. Sister Carmen is, boy, if it weren't for them, we'd be really up a creek. And they are always paddling hard for families here. And I can only imagine how much harder it's been during this pandemic. But 8% of families trying to get by under the poverty level, this is solvable. We don't have as much infrastructure in Lafayette as Boulder and Longmont do, but we've got more than nationally. So I'll let them speak to what's needed. It's a solvable issue if we would put some public resource behind it. But right now, with the status quo, there's not enough support there. When we get to our environment, we look at some substantial problems, but also hope and action. This is one thing I'm looking forward to the next report. There's a new environmental ecosystems trends report that just came out of CU and other local partners that is beginning to look at how climate change and soil quality, the emerald ash borer, our farming practices, all that contributes to the health of our environment. So stay tuned for more in-depth look at that. But meanwhile, here's what we do know about our environment. We know that what's contributing to our chronic ozone problem, and it is a chronic ozone problem, is mainly our oil and gas extraction. That's pretty near Lafayette, over there in the Weld County side mostly, our motor vehicle use, and our commercial buildings. We also have this inversion weather phenomenon. I see Councilman Tim Barnes, who knows a lot about the atmosphere, is on the call. Thanks for being here. The basically westbound winds coming across both sides of the Rockies pull over the Denver metro area and sit. It's that Denver brown cloud, and then it finally dissipates and sends its way out over the Platte, east of here, Kansas and beyond. that means that we have to be better stewards of our air quality here, because it's going to sit whatever we put out. And we get an F on many, many, many days in the metro area. So even though we think we're living in kind of clean air, Rocky Mountain High, we're sucking in more polluted air than we realize. I thought this was interesting. When you talk about commutes to work, obviously things have changed during the pandemic, but they've only changed for about the 30% of us workers who are fortunate to have telecommutable jobs. There's a lot of people, just on a public health call before this, who particularly parts of the Latino population, I mean, if they don't go to the location to work, they're out of a job. So some of this commuting pattern has calmed down during the pandemic, but some of it is still the same trend. And in Lafayette, we're seeing evidence of a bedroom community with less of a business district than would support the households. So 75% of our workforce in Lafayette does commute elsewhere. Most of them stay within Boulder County and go to Boulder and Longmont for their jobs. Like I said, the environmental work that's being done right now to baseline and measure what we're doing to restore and preserve our trees, bees, and soils is promising. This is a picture of Marcus McCauley. He's a farmer who raised the flag up near Longmont, was next to some City of Boulder owned open space way up by Longmont. And it was, the soil quality was poor because no one had a lease on it for too long. And the wind was blowing the dirt literally up against his fence, and his sheep were getting out by just walking over the fence. Not sure what's going on with my slideshow at the moment. Let's see. I think we're back. Maybe not. Here we go. So, when we talk about the environment and all this open space that we bought up around Lafayette and in Boulder County, this great green belt that separates our distinct communities, it's also important to think about who is naturally accessing this land. This is a picture of Latino family camp up in Calwood, half of which just burned in the fire. And I know in Lafayette, we've got this really great program that Thorn Nature Center conducts. And the whole theory is that if we can get kids interested right in their backyards in nature, they'll lead to the backcountry. But it's worth noting and understanding that this is a resource that we've put a lot of tax dollars behind, and we don't have all of our community using it. And so we need to pay attention to how inclusive we're being on our policies on our public lands. The thing I thought I'd point out here, just look at Lafayette on water use. We're at 82 gallons a day, and nationally the average is 80 to 100. So in Boulder County, we do conserve pretty good compared to the national average. But when you think about how we're in a semi-arid plains area, we need to be doing better than the national average. We are water constrained compared to some places, for example, on the East Coast. When we talk about our arts and culture, we've generally seen a positive trend in the industry. This county is a super big hub. There's more per capita artists here than just about anywhere outside Santa Fe or Los Angeles. And yet it's a lot of people doing this as a hobby. I noticed one of our participants on our call was going to be painting while they were on the call. And I think that, what we should pay attention to is that while we've got a vibrant art scene that we need to support, what that employment picture looks like for artists is not a whole lot of full-time artists. There's a lot of part-time, a lot of people doing it as a hobby on a contract here or there. But arts is the heartbeat of a community, and it's never been more clear than during a pandemic. I don't know about you, I miss going to live music, seeing art, public art, and talking with people as we enjoy art and music together. So that's something to be mindful of as we climb out of this pandemic. How do we not just support small businesses, but artists as well? And also part of the arts is how welcoming are we? This is a picture here about of Univision anchor Jorge Ramos reading a biographical sketch by Cristian Solana Cordova, part of Modus Theater's Shoebox Diaries about undocumented dreamers. And efforts like this help us connect with the greater community and understand how we need to be more inclusive. Finally, the last chapter focuses on our civic participation and giving. Some of you may remember when Zaid Atkinson was racially profiled and held up by police with guns drawn after picking up trash outside his Naropa student housing in Boulder back in March of 2019. You know, since then, with the murder of George Floyd and the national outcry over our, you know, triple pandemic, including our fraught race relations over the last 400 years, you know, this has been laid bare and hopefully is closer to the consciousness of more of us. It's always been a double-edged sword in Boulder County because so many of us identify as progressive, and we believe that we have that we are kind and friendly. And yet I'll show you a slide that shows that, you know, we may actually be less welcoming here than elsewhere. So here's a picture of Terry Garcia, Executive Director of El Paso, which is housed there in Lafayette, in the Sister Carmen Community Center, next to Rosana Longo, the bilingual KGNU reporter I referred to, who does the Trends podcast. You know, we do this is the one bit of original research we do. Everything else is aggregated from other sources, but we do put out a survey, and we find that Boulder County residents generally feel like we are open most to gay and lesbian people, families with young children, young adults without children, recent college grads. But we are kind of 50-50 or worse as far as whether we think we are welcoming to seniors, racial and ethnic minorities, or immigrants from other countries. I mentioned, I called out Carmen. Thank you for your work on the census, making sure that this was an inclusive effort. The Community Foundation was able to pull about $250,000 together and help field, in partnership with nonprofits across the county, a team of about 21 cultural brokers, people from traditionally hard to count populations that also understood how to navigate the census and systems. Carmen was instrumental in that effort, and I really do believe when the numbers come out, we're going to, despite the pandemic, see that we were hopefully able to get a complete and accurate count. It's never complete and accurate, but what you can do is try, and we get an A+ for the effort, particularly in the middle of a pandemic. We know that as a community, we're not very philanthropic. I mentioned this in the article that was in the camera yesterday. Our giving ratio, as far as, you know, what % of our income are we giving away, is lower than the national average. National average is 3.1%. We call this a $68 million giving opportunity. If everybody in Boulder County would give at the national average, we would increase our total contributions out of Boulder County from 292 million up to 360 million. So that's a nice way of putting it. We have a giving opportunity, and it's just my opportunity to plug that Tuesday's Colorado Gives Day usually brings in about 4.4 million for Boulder County nonprofits. That's obviously a smidgen of the $250 million that's going to leave this county philanthropically. It may seem like a lot of money, $250 million here, $250 million here, there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. And we're also the wealthiest patch of people in the state. So we can and should do average when it comes to our philanthropy as a percentage of our income. So that wraps up what I had to say. The whole point of this Trends Report is to discover, connect, and engage. Thank you for your time, and I'd love to open it up for a few questions. So Karen, I think, is our MC at this point.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. A lot of information. We did put the link in the chat for the Colorado Gives as well as the Trends Report, because there's a whole lot more information in there. to dig in. And for those of us that don't have perfect eyesight, sometimes it's hard to read those graphs and things. So it's great to go to the actual Community Foundation website and find the trends report. So let me go over a couple questions that are coming out here and a few comments. And as we go, as you all have a moment to reflect and digest in the many things that Chris just went over, put things in the chat and we'll answer as many as we can and try to get some discussion going as well. So the first question that popped up was from Joanna, and it was back about the kindergartners. Any notions or information about why the percentage of Boulder Valley kindergartners full day is so much smaller than St. Vrain and the rest of the state?
Yeah, I think it's quite simply put, Boulder Valley for a long time has a legacy of not being a school district, but a district of schools. The independent advocacy for kids to have a first through 12th education, but with wealthy, educated parents, actually having kids that were pretty Teflon from the ravages of not having a publicly supported system 0 to 5 has resulted in how we're going to spend a dollar kind of conversations at school boards. And when you compound that over decades and you got people that advocating for their kids to be offered many extracurricular activities, many APs, they want them to compete, they want them to get into Stanford, Harvard, CU, Colorado College, you name it. Where are the dollars being spent in a district of schools full of advocates that are from the more educated, higher wealth band of society, the whiter band of society? It's going to be a system that supports them. And that's what we have. In St. Vrain, I would call it a school system. You have much more homogeneity of delivery of services, and you also have a more diverse, you've got student population, you've got also a more diverse economic picture, and you have a school district, like a lot of districts across the state, that look bad if the band of students from the low income and minority populations are not doing well. If it is a small enough slice of your overall population and you can brag instead about how you're crushing it, then you don't get slapped by the state. You don't get slapped by your own community. There's no accountability. And we're also in a tax-rich environment compared to the rest of the state, where Boulder Valley voters have never met a tax increase they wouldn't approve. So this is based in fact. It sounds like I got feelings about it, but that's how I'd answer it.
Amen, I would say. It's hard. Sometimes I scratch my head when we look at things at the state level about any kind of increases or fees or anything, that sometimes it's very difficult. And I keep thinking part of the a small piece of at the end of everything where the taxpayers are asked for money, there should be a little sentence saying, okay, but if you want this, who do you think is going to pay for it? There is no sugar daddy. And of course, some people say, well, we'll just take money from someplace else. And I would say, well, what place would that be?
Right. And while we're generous in Boulder, I also challenge us to think about support for the rest of the state. Do you believe public education ought to be a system that redistributes from the wealth centers of the state and provides quality access to education for all? Should you have to afford to live in Boulder Valley if you instead live in the in Commerce City? Is that tough because your family lives in Commerce City as far as your future? So I urge our taxpayers who are generous when it comes to supporting our local measures to also, think twice when the sausage is being ground out at the Capitol and they oftentimes are saying there's not enough in here or there's too big a loss for Boulder Valley. Let's try to be more Colorado focused, I would say.
Yeah, I think that, and that's sometimes hard for people. It's to think outside your family, think outside your town, your county, and then to the state at least, and trying to think of community, which not only looks at resources as that as an issue, but also that's also a public health issue. And this perhaps is a little bit of the fight going on around the masks. It's not just about your individual decision. It really is about the impact on the whole community, on who's going to get educated, who's going to get the resources, who's going to stay healthy or make everybody else sick or whatever. We're all part of a piece, and sometimes we forget that, I think.
Mhm.
So we have a couple more comments, and feel free to keep asking questions and put things in the chat. One point, I think this comes from Marta, a couple points from Marta, comments about wanting you to put a few of the slides together so people could really see what happens, like when you put affordable housing overlay slide, I think overlaid with perhaps income or other issues. What does that then look like? What are those slides? What happens with those slides? And I think for some of us, if you could tease out like a town and then you overlay it, then it's very dramatic and obvious to you. What is that saying to me? Similarly, she was talking about when you say Lafayette has children under the poverty line at 9%, bringing it home, saying 2,000, that's 2,340 kids. That's 2,340 children that live in our city limits that are hungry, food insecure, and probably resource insecure. You know, these are just ways of making them more alive. She was just talking about that in several of her points. And another piece was around part-time contract artists. Are they considered professional or are they considered hobbyists?
Here we're talking about people that make money, be it on the degree between the hobby artist that's not pulling in income is not charted here. This is SCFD info, starting with I have a contract, a commission, let's say, to I'm part-time, hourly, doing my art, to this is my full-time job.
Gotcha. Yeah, which we saw that COVID made this really complicated. When, say you are an artist doing it full-time and you don't get a salary, did you get any COVID money? You know, that was part of the self-employed or freelancers and all kinds of people that are depending on lots of different sources of income that isn't a traditional, I work for an institution or a corporation or an agency that got left out at first. And you know, it remains a big problem. Another question coming out, do you have any insights to explain the charitable contributions gap? You know, why donations are so much lower than average considering the high income in this area?
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with housing costs. I think part of it has to do with newer wealth where, you know, you haven't, maybe your family's situation has changed in the last decade. You've gone from recent college grad eating ramen noodles to an executive position at a corporation, pulling well into the six figures home, and you haven't thought, oh, that means I need to proportionally increase what I give. I feel like what I give is so much more than I ever did before. Okay, but your personal wealth is even bigger. So if we're collectively going to keep up, you know, and you want to pay your fair share of rent for living on this earth, and you want to be socially minded that way, think about that. Look at your gross income. Think about whether what you're giving is at least 3.1%, and then try to get there. You don't have to do it overnight, but get there, and then see if you can get even better. Part of it is also we're not a religious community. I talk to any of the faith leaders on this call. I see here he's a tire method.
Chris, you're breaking up. We can't.
That's the idea that you're giving back to others about 10%. That's another reason. I think it's a peer pressure. And you're more likely to be taken out to lunch and told, hey, we had a big financial event. We named a hospital. Think about your alma mater, hospital, local health clinic. Think about serving on some boards. That kind of peer pressure isn't as prevalent out here in the independent West.
I see. Okay.
Karen, Suzanne Crawford just put some comments into the chat.
Let's see. Do you want to unmute Suzanne for just a moment and see if she wants to say anything, or?
If it's a good time, I can give a quick update before I have to jump off again. And I'm so sorry that I was late.
We only have a few minutes anyway.
Okay. So just to and I don't know that this segues well with what Chris was talking about, but I had been asked to kind of give an update on what we're seeing right now. We at Sister Carmen are still seeing a very high need for financial assistance. And we have done over 1,700 appointments by phone since the beginning of the pandemic, which we say that's around March 16th for us. And we've done a little over $1.1 million of financial assistance in that time. Mostly rent and mortgage, but also utilities and water bills. And just to give folks a little bit of perspective, that's about 5.5 times what we might do in a normal full calendar year. So it's definitely very, very high demand. Food is also still in high demand, and we are continuing to run a drive-through food bank. And it's pretty steady. We've given out about 900,000 pounds since March 16th through the drive-through food bank. Typically 40 to 60 cars a day go through. It gets a little bit busier right before the holidays. For instance, there was a couple of days right before Thanksgiving where we had 100 cars go through each of those days. So that continues to be a very high need. And then we continue to do educational support for parents and families over Zoom. So we're still running nurturing parenting sessions in both English and Spanish over Zoom, and also Circle of Parents support groups. And these have been very, very popular throughout this time, because as you can imagine, people are just looking for any sort of support or advice that they can get right now. It's just a very difficult time and challenging time for parents. And we're also, and this is the one that sort of blows my mind, is we started offering our digital literacy classes again in September via Zoom. And we weren't really sure how we were going to do that, because these are folks that typically don't have any experience with computers or internet. So what we have been doing is we've got some coaches available who can meet someone in a socially distanced place on their front porch and sort of show them how to log on to Zoom so that they can participate in the classes. And we've had about 50 people participate since September. And we're also doing those in both English and Spanish, but primarily Spanish. So that's kind of just in a nutshell what we've been up to.
That's so helpful, Suzanne, because many of us have been wondering, this is data collected back before COVID, and we've been wondering what's been going on. And a lot of people know that there's desperate need out there. And Sister Carmen, we're so glad you're there, along with many other nonprofits here. But you all are the backbone here for our safety net in our community in so many ways. So thank you and your staff.
Can I just make one final comment? Thank you. And I just wanted to say that it's been very interesting, because I know Chris was just talking a little bit about why giving seems to be low percentage-wise in Boulder County. And I have to say that we are extremely grateful at Sister Carmen, because during this time of very high need, we've also had many, many new donors start giving. And that has really helped sustain us through this time period. We have not had to turn anyone away. So we're hopeful that some of these folks that have been around and have been living here for years but haven't been giving will now continue to give.
Great. Thank you,
Suzanne. You were built for this moment. People are rewarding you for that. And also, we have seen that the reason why giving is depressed, among 10 reasons, is that if people don't see the need, they don't give. What better excuse than a pandemic to begin to see, like a pandemic to sustain.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I know we're a minute over time here, so I want to thank everybody for joining us and caring so much about Lafayette and residents and making Lafayette even better than it is. And we will be sending a link out to everyone who registered for the evaluation, and everybody will get that link to not only fill out the evaluation, but so then we can get back in touch with you and give you a small thank you incentive treat from the city and the Arts Commission, just for taking your time out. I know it's a crazy time, and just taking out an hour is a lot to ask for all of you. So please get that link and complete it before midnight on Tuesday, so we can then send something back to you for some chamber bucks that's good at 100 different stores, restaurants, and places in Lafayette. And I want to thank Susan Booker for helping us out and getting this whole thing going, as well as your whole staff, Rachel, Maddie, everyone that has been a part of this on the Arts Commission, getting the word out. And special thanks to you for Chris to come again and see us even during COVID, to actually help point out the Lafayette piece, as well as put us in context for the community. So we thank you all so very much for attending and sticking through with us. Everybody who registered will get that link so that you can evaluate the program, and you will also get the recording as well in case you want to take a look and stop. And you also in the chat saw a link to the trends report on their Community Foundation's website, as well as the Colorado Gives Day.
We are saving all of your comments in the chat. So if you have any last minute questions you want to type in, you can do that. Also, you can send questions back when I send out the email with the link and all of the other things that Karen has mentioned. That'll be included in that. We're happy to do some more follow-up. Sorry, we didn't have time to get to everyone's questions, but thank you all so much for joining us.
Right, and I put out Chris's email in the chat as well, but if you missed it, it's simply chrisbarge@gmail.com. Sorry.
Well, let me put my work email in there, just because I look at it more frequently than my personal one.
Oh, good point. Sorry about that.
Yeah, use chris@confound.org and I'll get back to you more quickly.
Please do that. Thanks, everybody, and so much thanks for you, Chris. As always, keep up the great work on the Trends Report, and Community Foundation and all the staff there are so appreciated for all the work.
For all you do at the Cultural Arts Commission, Karen and Susan and everybody, pulling Lafayette together. We all got to pull together, whether we're zooming in live from our homes or later on being able to meet in person. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.